Yeah, okay. So sorry, there was an interruption. Yeah. So this is a biosphere reserve, right? Okay. So they are designed to conserve not just a species, but the entire ecosystem, including the traditional lifestyle of the people. So this is a biosphere. What are the different zones of a biosphere? This is very important. Okay, so core zone. So what is the core zone? It is the innermost, strictly protected part of the biosphere reserve. Let me show the picture once. So this is the core zone, right? Okay, so it is strictly protected. Nobody can enter this region. Nobody is allowed to enter this region. This is the core zone. And then we have the buffer zone, where some people will be allowed. People will be allowed for taking photography or doing some research or for learning purposes. So it will be allowed in the buffer zone. And then the transition zone is the last zone where sometimes people will be allowed. Okay, so people will be allowed to live there, and they can also do some research, and they can take photographs and all of these things. But the core zone, nobody can enter. Hmm? Yeah. So what is the core zone? It is the innermost strictly protected part of the biosphere reserve, and it holds high biodiversity value, harboring rare and endangered species. Okay, so this zone has rare and endangered species. And what are the activities? No humans are allowed here. No human activity is allowed here, except for scientific monitoring and research. Yeah, okay. So just for collecting data or something, sometimes some people will be allowed, but otherwise, no other human can enter this region. It is legally protected. Okay. I think I have to change this color to black. It's too light. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next region is buffer zone. This zone surrounds the core zone, right? Okay. So around the core zone, we have the buffer zone. What is allowed here? It acts as a shield for the core area, minimizing external impacts. It acts as a protective region. And what are the activities allowed here? Limited human activities are permitted. These include educational activities. Yeah, okay. So for educational purposes, ecological research, and limited tourism. Only ecotourism. People can't exploit that region, but they can go visit. Maybe they can go see the animals, and provided they are not destructive and sustainable. So this is allowed in the buffer zone. And then in the transition, now this is the outermost part of the biosphere reserve, right? Okay, the transition zone. And it is a zone of cooperation focusing on sustainable development, because people are allowed to live there, right? Okay, but they should live sustainability. They should not do any harm to the forest and the organisms. And then what are the activities? A variety of human activities are permitted here. So agriculture, settlements, forestry, and other resource management practices. So everything is done in this region. Okay, so these are the three important zones, and you're also asked to explain it diagrammatically, right? Okay, so explain diagrammatically. So the diagram is also important. Yeah. Okay. Then the next one. Explain any two techniques of ex situ conservation of plant species of biodiversity. Yeah, in situ and ex situ. What does in situ mean? On site, and ex situ means off site, not in that region. Okay, so what are some of the ex situ conservations of biodiversity? Botanical gardens. So, what are botanical gardens? These are gardens designed for scientific research, conservation, public display, and education. Yeah. Okay, so scientific research will be carried out in those gardens. They're not just parks or something. There will be deep research going on there, and they will also take measures to conserve the species. And it is also open to public can go visit these places. And also for educational purposes. So what is the mechanism that is followed here? Threatened, rare, or endangered species, they will be collected, and they will be preserved there, and they will also be propagated in that region. So they'll be grown in a controlled environment that mimics their natural habitat as closely as possible. Yeah. And then significance, they serve as a repositories of genetic diversity. Okay. So they serve as, places where these genes are protected, right? So by cultivating these plants, researchers can study their biology, propagate them in a safe environment, and eventually reintroduce them into the wild. Okay, so because these are endangered species, so they will be protected there, and they will also be studied, and scientists will also propagate them so that they're able to, reintroduce them into the wild. Then another method is seed bank. So what is a seed bank? Yeah, it is a facility that's, yeah, as the name implies, it is a place where people, they store and they preserve the seeds in a secure, controlled environment to maintain their viability and genetic integrity. Yes. So what is the purpose? To preserve the genetic material, right? Okay. So because we've seen that many species are becoming rare now, some of them are becoming extinct now. So if their genes are not protected, then those species will be lost forever, right? We won't be able to revive them in later years. So, but if you are able to preserve their genes, right? Okay. So, say for example, in plants, if you're able to preserve the seeds, then even if that plant variety is gone, if we do have the seeds, then we can propagate new variety of seed, right? Maybe in later years. So that's why preserving the seeds is also very important. So the gene material of plant species, particularly those that are difficult to conserve in situ or are at high risk of extinction. So, endangered species, their seeds will be preserved in the seed banks. So, what is the mechanism that is followed here? They are collected, cleaned, dried to reduce moisture content, and then stored at very low temperatures. Okay, so freezing temperatures, so that they are not contaminated and they are preserved. So, in airtight containers. Then, what is the significance here? This method allows for the storage of vast amounts of genetic diversity. Yes. Okay, so a lot of species, those seeds can be preserved in a small space. And these seeds can be kept for decades or even centuries and used for research and all the other things. Okay, because they are stored in the below freezing temperatures, right, at minus 18 degrees C. So they won't be, the we will be able to preserve them for many years, even for centuries. They'll be preserved, and later on, they can, people can do a lot of research and breeding programs and everything on these seeds. Yeah. In the next one, what is meant by demography? And yeah, if N is a total number of individuals in the population, then define birth rate, death rate, and growth rate of the population. Also give expressions for each one of them for their determination. Yeah. So the first term is demography. What is demography? It is a scientific and statistical study of human populations, right? Okay. So learning about the different, you know, human populations and their settlements and their growth pattern, their movement pattern, everything. So it involves analyzing the size, structure, age, sex, composition, and distribution of population, as well as the spatial and temporal changes, everything. Okay, so learning about all the different things that happen in a population, that is what we call demography, and it helps in understanding population trends and planning for resource accordingly. So why do we have to do a study of this demography? So that we are able to understand the trends in population and also the planning. Okay, so how do we plan for providing for all of these people? So to get an idea, they do this demography study. Yeah. Then what are the key population indicators and expressions? Yeah. Okay. So here N represents the total number of individuals in a population. And then what these are the following indicators. The first one is birth rate or natality. Yeah. We've already discussed about this, right? What is birth rate? The number of persons born per thousand. Okay, per thousand individuals, how many babies are born? So that is the birth rate. So birth rate is number of live births during a year divided by n into 1,000. And then what is death rate? The number of deaths during a year. Okay, deaths per thousand. Death rate refers to the number of deaths per thousand individuals in a population. Okay, so deaths per year. And then growth rate is the net change in the population over a specific period. Yeah. Okay. So how a population grows, whether there is an increase in the number of people or whether there is a decrease in the number of people. Okay. So that is growth rate. And it is determined by the balance between the birth rate and the Death rate, yeah. So if the birth rate is higher than the death rate, then the population is going to increase. Or if the birth rate is lower than the death rate, then the population will decrease, right? So growth rate is birth rate minus death rate. Yeah. Okay. So then the next question, define an ecosystem and take examples of a pond as an ecosystem and explain its components. Yeah, this is also a very important question. This is a 5 marker. So it means it is a long answer question. So the first one, what is an ecosystem? It is a basic functional unit of nature, right? And what does it contain? It contains all the different organisms, right? From microorganisms and then plant varieties, different plant varieties, right? Okay. Taking from small grass and shrubs and then trees and everything, and then all the living organisms. Um, living organisms means I'm talking about birds and animals, everything. So, and this ecosystem, it contains all of them. And also there is an interaction, right? There is a relationship between the different organisms, relationship between birds and plants, between plants and animals. So there is always an interdependency or a peaceful relationship between all the different organisms. So this is what we call an ecosystem, and it comprises a community of organisms and its physical environment interacting as an ecological unit. Yeah. Then what are the components of pond ecosystem? Yeah, here the ecosystem that we are considering is a pond ecosystem. So what is a pond? It is a self-sustaining unit. Yeah. Okay. So self-sustaining means nobody has to take care of a pond, right? Of a natural pond, because it is able to regulate and it is able to take care of itself on its own. So that is what we call a self-sustaining unit. And it representing freshwater aquatic ecosystems. And what are the components? The first one is abiotic components. Abiotic means non-living components. So what are the non-living components? The first one is water. So the physical medium that supports all life in the pond, right? And then we also have dissolved minerals and yeah, we have dissolved minerals and nutrients, because water contains a lot of organisms like plants and fish and all the other organisms, right? So all of their dead matter, all of the organic matter will be dissolved in the water. So water contains a lot of dissolved minerals and nutrients. So it contains nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and oxygen. So everything is dissolved here. So it also makes abiotic component. And then solar energy, sun. It is the major, we can say it is the vital source for all of the life, right? The primary source of energy for the ecosystem, which drives photosynthesis. And then temperature and light, even the climate and the temperature. Okay, so what is the temperature and how much light is received by that pond? So all of these factors are called abiotic factors. And then we also have biotic components or living components. What are the biotic components? It includes all living organisms. So it contains producers. Producers means the plants, right? Autotrophs. These organisms produce their own food. So in a in a pond, we have phytoplankton. What is phytoplankton? It is a microscopic algae floating on the water surface. Phytoplankton. And then aquatic plants, they're rooted or floating plants, right? We also have a number of aquatic plants like hydrilla and a lotus, all of them. And then we have consumers or heterotrophs, okay, organisms which depend upon the plant for their nutrients. And in consumers, we have primary consumers, herbivores, secondary and tertiary. Primary consumers, these are animals that feed directly on producers. So the examples are zooplanktons, microscopic animals, and small fish. Then we have secondary consumers. These are animals which feed on the primary consumers. Example is small fish and frogs. Then the third one is tertiary consumers. They are larger animals. Examples large fish and predatory birds like kingfishers. Yeah. So these are the um, biotic component. These make the biotic component. And then we also have another important factor, which is the decomposers. So what are decomposers? We also call them saprotrophs. Saprotrophs. And what is their function? These are microorganisms like bacteria and fungi, and they do the most important, function, which is breaking down of organic matter. So without the presence of decomposers, pond will become, it will become, a stinky thing, right? Okay, in a few days, right? Because of all the animals and plants and so many organisms living there, right? Okay, so whenever an organism dies, so these decomposers will act on the body of the organism and they will completely break down the body into its basic constituents, like say what nitrogen and all of the basic uh, elements. So that is the main function that is performed by decomposers. So it is, see, dead organic matter is broken down into simple inorganic nutrients. Yeah, and so these nutrients are then released back into the water to be reused by the producers. Then these, you can see that these nutrients will be released back into the water, and these nutrients will be absorbed by the plants, and then it will go to the organism, right? You can see that all of these nutrients are also being circulated, right? There is a cycle that's happening there. Yeah. And what is meant by air pollution? And name the various particulates and gaseous air pollutants, their sources and harmful effects. How can air pollution be prevented and controlled? Give four measures. Yeah, so you know what is meant by air pollution, right? What is air pollution? The presence of substances in the atmosphere in concentrations which are higher than the normal optimal level, which are high enough to cause harm to human health, other living organisms, or damage. Yeah. Okay, so that is air pollution. Mm, yeah. Okay. So, mm, so what are the main pollutants? The first one is particulate pollutants, particles. What are the different particles? Dust. We have dust, smoke, soot, soot, fly ash, pollen, and aerosols. So all of these are the particles that are present in the air which pollute them. And what are the sources of these particulate pollutants? Industries, mostly industries, and the next one is traffic. So, industrial processes, power plants, construction activities, automobile exhaust, and agricultural burning. Yeah, even burning. Okay, so after harvesting, sometimes the farmers will burn all of the all of the dead plants, right? Okay, so that will also contribute to the smoke and dust and everything. So these are the sources. Then what are the harmful effects? If the air contains a lot of suspended particles, then these particles can easily get into the bodies of living organisms because all living organisms they breathe, right? Okay. So when we breathe in, all of these particles might get into our bodies and they will cause a number of diseases. Yeah. So what are the diseases? Asthma, bronchitis, lung infections, and everything. And they also reduce visibility. Yeah, this is also a major problem in cities, right? Particularly in in India, in Delhi, during winter months, this fog will combine with the smoke and it will form smog, right? So it forms a thick cover and it will completely reduce the visibility. So therefore, the region is prone to accidents, right? Because of this reduced visibility and can also settle on plants, hindering photosynthesis. Another important thing is these dust particles can settle on the surfaces of leaves. And we know that it is these leaves which absorb the sunlight and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right, for photosynthesis. So if the top surface of the leaf is covered with all of this dust, then the leaf won't be able to absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide. Then it won't be able to produce, do this photosynthesis. So sometimes the leaves growth, the plant's growth might also be affected. So these are the harmful effects. And then the gaseous pollutants. What are the gaseous pollutants? Carbon monoxide, and then sulfur dioxide. So what is its source? Incomplete combustion of fossil fuel. So that is the major source of carbon monoxide. And then sulfur dioxide, burning of coal and petroleum. It causes sulfur dioxide. And we can see the effects. Carbon monoxide reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of blood and it leads to dizziness. Yeah. Headaches and even death. Yeah. Then sulfur dioxide, it causes respiratory issues. It is acidic, right? So it causes respiratory issues and it combines with water vapor to form acid rain, which damages buildings and plants. Yeah, so this is sulfur dioxide. And then we have nitrogen oxides. Then where do we get them from? Automobile exhaust and industrial emissions. Then what are the effects? It causes respiratory irritation and contributes to the formation of photochemical smog. Yeah, I've already told you, right? Okay, so smog means the combination of smoke and fog. So it causes smog and also acid rain. And chlorofluorocarbons, these are released, hmm, right, by refrigerators, air conditioners, and aerosol sprays. What do? They will break down ozone molecules. It depletes the ozone layer, leading to increased ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth. So when the ozone layer is depleted, um, then it acts as a blanket, right? It acts as a protective blanket against the sun's harmful UV radiation. So once this ozone layer is depleted, if there are holes, then all of the harmful UV radiations from the sun will reach the Earth's surface, and it will cause a number of diseases like skin diseases and all of these things. Then how do we prevent air pollution? First, we have to start using clean fuels. Okay, so mm, so what is meant by clean fuel? Fuel which does not give out harmful emissions. So that is a clean fuel. So for example, solar energy, it is a clean fuel, right? Similarly, shifting from coal and high sulfur diesel to cleaner alternatives like CNG, LPG, and solar energy. So that is one method. And then, yeah, installation of pollution control devices. Yes. Okay. All of the automobiles, they can be fixed with pollution control devices so that whenever the pollution level increases, whenever the emission from that particular automobile, if it increases a certain limit, then then the person will be, they will be notified, right? Okay. So the person will get an idea. So, and then the person might do something, right? He might either fix the situation or he might change the vehicle. So the person might do something, right? So that is one thing. Industry and also industries. Yeah, industries can also fix this pollution control device, and these devices can monitor. They can monitor the emissions that are coming out from the industry. And if it exceeds a certain limit, then it will be notified, and the industry has to uh, you know do something to reduce the pollution. And vehicle maintenance and emission checks. Yeah, okay. So the same emission check can be done in vehicles also, and proper maintenance should also be done. So if a properly maintained vehicle will reduce the harmful emissions. And another thing is afforestation. What is afforestation? We should try to plant more trees, as many trees as possible, because we know that trees, they act as carbon dioxide sink. So what is meant by carbon dioxide sink? Trees, they absorb carbon dioxide, because all plants, they, for photosynthesis, they need carbon dioxide, right? So they will absorb carbon dioxide. Okay. And they will also trap all of the particulate matter on their leaves. So that way they purify the air. So that is another method. Yeah. So here, the next question is, explain the following terms: ozone hole, greenhouse effect, radiation, thermal pollution, and soil pollution. Yeah, so all of these are very important terms. So the first one, ozone hole. We already discussed about this. What is ozone hole? The upper layer of the Earth's atmosphere contained a thick layer called ozone, and it is made up of O3. O3, ozone molecule is O3, and so what happens when chlorofluorocarbons are released from the earth? Then the chlorine that is contained in chlorofluorocarbon, this chlorine will break down the oxygen ozone molecule in the presence of sunlight. Okay, and this oxygen molecule will be broken down to oxygen atoms. This ozone molecule will be broken down to oxygen atoms. So then what happens when this ozone molecule is broken down? Then the ozone layer will become thin. Okay, so and that's what we call ozone hole. And this thinning is caused by release of chlorofluorocarbons. Yeah. And then what happens? Um, it reduces the atmosphere's ability to block the harmful UV radiations from the sun. Yeah. So when these UV radiations reach the Earth's surface, what do? They cause skin cancer, cataracts, and damage marine ecosystems. So these are the harmful effects of what? Ozone hole. and it is caused by chlorofluorocarbons. So that's why they are advising to reduce the usage of chlorofluorocarbons. Now the next thing is greenhouse effect. Yeah. So what is greenhouse effect? It is a natural process where certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere, like carbon dioxide and methane, water vapor, nitrous oxide, all of these are, um, mm, these are trapped. Okay, so they trap the heat radiated from the Earth's surface, because what happens is when the greenhouse gases concentration increases, their function is to trap sun's heat energy. So if they are available in a particular level, at the optimum level, then they will trap enough heat energy just to maintain the we can say the mm, perfect temperature on the Earth's surface, right? But what happens when the concentration of the greenhouse gases increased beyond a certain limit, then they will trap more and more heat, okay, on the Earth's surface. And this is what causes heating of the Earth's surface. And this heating, it leads to a lot of other things, right? What are the other things? Greenhouse effect and global warming. It has caused global warming. We can see that the glaciers are melting, right? Okay, the ocean levels are rising. So all of these are consequences of the greenhouse effect. And the next one is radiation. Yes, what is radiation? The emission and propagation of energy through space. That is radiation. So sometimes it is non-ionizing, like UV rays or radio waves. Sometimes it is ionizing, like X-rays and gamma rays. And some radiations are natural. Hmm? Like say, for example, sun's radiation is, it is natural. And we also have some other radiations, like, nuclear power plants radiation, then medical treatments, industrial processes, they will also cause some radiation. So all of these are the different factors. uh, yeah. Okay, so for radiation, yes. And then the thermal pollution. What is thermal pollution? It is the degradation of water quality by a process that changes the ambient water temperature. So when the temperature of water changes, then that will also cause pollution. So how does it cause pollution? See, how does the temperature change? First of all, sometimes industrial facilities, they will let in their hot water into the neighboring water body. So this sudden increase in water temperature, it will cause a disturbance in the ecosystem, right? In the say in the pH level and all of these things. Okay, so there will be a delicate balance in the in that particular ecosystem. But if the temperature changes drastically, then the value of the water will also change sometimes, or sometimes because of the simple heating, some organisms might die. Right. Okay. Because the fish won't be able to bear the heat. Right. Okay. So thermal pollution will cause the temperature to rise, thereby causing some animals to die. And another thing is sometimes harmful effluents from the industries will also get mixed with the water bodies. So it will lead to a change in the pH level, and this change in pH level will also cause some organisms to die. So yeah, so these are the two things. And then soil pollution. Yes, we've already discussed about soil pollution, right? Okay, so the presence of toxic chemicals in the soil because of various factors. The first thing is in agricultural practices, people, when they use fertilizers, insecticides, and pesticides, and then this will get into the soil and also into the water bodies, and it will cause soil pollution. Yeah. Mm. So what does it do? It degrades soil fertility, contaminates groundwater, and allows toxic substances to enter the food chain. Yes. Okay. So all of these are the consequences of soil pollution. Then optional module A, water resource management. Explain the following terms. First one is pathogenic pollution. Yes. What is pathogenic pollution? The contamination of water bodies by disease-causing organisms known as pathogens. Okay. So the water bodies are contaminated by some disease-causing organisms. Okay. So what are the pathogens? Bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and parasitic forms. So what are the sources? Primarily from domestic sewage, right? From wastewater. It contains a lot of pathogens, human and animal excreta. Everything will be mixing with the water bodies, right? So these are the sources of pathogens. And what are the harmful effects? Water is contaminated, and it poses severe risk to public health, right? Because when public have to use this water, sometimes it will uh, mm, causing severe health problems, and is also responsible for spread of various waterborne diseases like cholera, typhoid, dysentery, hepatitis. All of these are waterborne diseases. Means the infection will be spread only through water. So if people of one particular area use contaminated water, then all of them, they will be affected by these diseases. And then humans and animals contract diseases by drinking contaminated water. Yeah. Then another thing is eutrophication. What is eutrophication? A process wherein a water body becomes excessively enriched with nutrients. Yeah, it happens, right? Because as more and more organic matter is added to that water body, then the nutrient content in that water body will become so high. So the nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. So then this nutrient enrichment leads to a rapid growth in aquatic plants, right? Okay, so plants like, algae. So this is what we call algal bloom. Mm, Yeah. So how does it happen? First of all, nutrients from agricultural runoff, domestic sewage, and industrial waste enter the water body. Okay, so first of all, nutrient is added. Then excessive supply causes multiplication of algae. And then what happens? This dense algal bloom blocks the sunlight from reaching underwater plants, right? Because we know that even though there are underwater plants, they do need some sunlight for photosynthesis, right? But this thick layer of algae, this algal bloom, it will block sunlight reaching the lower layers of the water body, right? So then what happens? These organisms, these plants will die because they're not able to get enough sunlight. And the next one, when the algae die, they're decomposed by bacteria, and this process consumes a large amount of oxygen. So even when these algae are alive, they are a big threat, okay, because they block sunlight. And even when they die, the decomposition process of this algae takes up a lot of oxygen. It absorbs a lot of oxygen from the water body. Okay, then what happens? The other organisms won't be able to get enough oxygen, right? Because all the organisms, even though they live in water, they do need oxygen, right? Be it underwater plants, or be it other fish or other organisms, all of them, they need oxygen. They'll absorb oxygen from the water. But once again, yeah. So So this decomposition process will consume a lot of oxygen. So the other organisms won't get enough oxygen. So if they don't get enough oxygen, they will. So these are the consequences. The depletion of dissolved oxygen leads to the death of fish and other aquatic organisms. So you can see that this is a harmful process, eutrophication, right? Okay. So uncontrolled addition of what? Addition of nutrients to the water bodies will also severely, damage the ecosystem of the water bodies. So, yeah. So this will do for today. We still have some more questions. Okay, we'll discuss them in our next class. Yeah. Okay, we'll continue in our next class. Bye.